America didn't invade any countries last year, but one city still managed to become a war zone. Unfortunately, it was within our borders, Baltimore, Maryland. It ended the year with 343 murders, or 56 for every 100,000 people. That's the city's highest per capita rate ever, greater even than during the Great Crack Epidemic, the sad epidemic of the 1980s. There's one obvious culprit for this, a stand down by police. After the 2015 riots there following the death of Freddie Gray, Baltimore cops were pressured to back off on tough policing tactics. A lot of them were afraid to go out and do what they did before. For the most part, they backed off, and this is the result. LaDawn Jones is a criminal defense attorney, and she joins us tonight. LaDawn, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me back, Tucker. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So, look, there are people in Baltimore who are, not right-wingers who actually live there, in contrast to a lot of the leaders of Black Lives Matter, rich kids on college campuses, who are saying that the police leaving has been a tragedy. This is the Reverend Kinsey Scott, an activist in the city. Quote, "We wanted the police there. We wanted them engaged in the community." Why wouldn't people who live in a city with over 300 murders want police keeping order?
Well, they absolutely do. No one never said that they didn't. They want the same thing that you talked about in your last few segments. They just don't want government overreach by having police officers who are abusive to innocent people and abusing their power rather than performing their role as law enforcement.
Well, I think everybody wants that for sure, and I agree with them completely. I hate any abuse of power, whether it's by the cops or the DMV worker you deal with, or anybody. Abuse of power is always wrong. But that's not at all what the Black Lives Matter people in Baltimore were saying. I mean, it was the cops are the problem, the city's a bad place because of the cops, and then, of course, there were threats of violence against the police. So if you're a Baltimore police officer, why would you even bother to put your reputation or your life on the line to help people?
Well, I understand your argument. As a public servant, when you have a thankless job, it's very hard to get up the next day and do what you need to do, but that's what you sign up for. I don't think that the Black Lives Matter stands. And last time I was on your show, you listed me as a Black Lives Matter activist. I'm not an activist, but I do understand their issue. They don't want government overreach by too much force by the police, and that's what they said, but that's not what people heard. People heard, we don't want the police, when really they said, we don't want the police to kill us, which is a pretty different thing.
Right. So the whole, pigs in a blanket, murder cop stuff, that was the nuanced message that you're describing?
Well, I wouldn't think it is any more fair than to put all people who have this kind of negative and divisive connotation as for the whole city of Baltimore or the entire Black Lives Matter, any more fair than it would be to say that every white person is with the Ku Klux Klan or a neo-Nazi. That's not the case, right?
No, that was at a Black Lives Matter march. So, I mean, it's not like some out of nowhere connection. That was at a march, and it's on video, so it's not like I'm making it up, as you well know. In every movement, there are detractors. There are people who try to take away from the real change and be divisive. There are people who are misled. We've seen that in every single movement that there was. Black Lives Matter is no different. But anyone who really looks at what they stand for, what they put out, what their leaders expose, is really getting to the 21st century policing and making sure there's no government overreach with all of us. You keep using that phrase. I mean, I doubt that you're against any kind of government overreach except this one. But with that, let's just stick to this topic. 2017, 343 murders in the city of Baltimore. Why is that?
Well, I don't live in Baltimore. I live in Atlanta, but I can tell you as a former prosecutor, there are a number of factors that go into the increase of criminal activity. But one of the number one things, the things that Black Lives Matter ask and many others, is that we want to make sure that the police are involved and an integral part of the community, not against the community. And they have not reached that point yet.
But hold on, I'm confused. So you say that you're part of Black Lives Matter, at least sympathetic to it. So it's in the name, Black Lives Matter. I don't know what percentage of those 243. Well, I didn't say that, but yeah. Okay. I don't know what percentage of those murder victims were African-American, the overwhelming majority. So I'm a little concerned and confused by why you wouldn't have a better answer than there are a lot of reasons. It's a serious question. Why were 343 people murdered in Baltimore this year? Have you thought about why?
Absolutely, but I don't understand what one argument has to do with the other. There are a number of reasons why there were murders of black lives, and all black lives, all lives do in fact matter. And so whether they're taken by the hands of the police or of criminals, I think people who really care about their community want to address both of those. It doesn't have to be either or.
Why? Because Black Lives Matter spends a lot of, look, and Black Lives Matter spends all of its time talking about how the cops are the problem, but I don't hear anybody even thinking through, like, why is this happening? That's a lot of people to die in a small city, and I never hear anybody say why.
Tucker, I have a hard time believing that you really have a whole lot of conversations with Black Lives Matter to know what they only talk about.
I'm having one right now, and I can't get a straight answer, which is a little bit revealing, I would say.
Absolutely not. Well, see, that's exactly what I just told you when we came on. I'm not a Black Lives Matter activist, but I do understand why excessive force is an issue.
Oh, but you haven't.
As all Americans, I would hope that you would have too. All Americans should think about this issue, and we're actually saying the same thing.
That's why I'm doing this segment, because
I
want to get a real answer, but I'm not getting one.
And that's the answer. What is the question?
Thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
This president literally tried to kill our communities.
LaDawn Jones is a Democratic strategist, and she joins us tonight. Thanks for coming on, LaDawn. So I'm watching that, and I'm thinking that we're not really in the realm of political debate here. That's what extremism looks like. I mean, by definition, if you really believe someone is Hitler, you wouldn't debate his policies. You'd do what Dietrich Bonhoeffer tried to do. You tried to take him out by force. So. Do you think she really means that when she says he's like Hitler?
She absolutely means it, and I completely agree with her. You know, Trump's policies have been ratcheting up over the time of him running his campaign until now, just recently with him pardoning the Arizona sheriff. It is becoming very concerning, and people like Black Lives Matter and the other folks who are watching and have known that he would be a problem have the right to teach and get people prepared to resist him at all costs. Now, we are still a democracy, so we're not going to try to remove him from office by force, but we are certainly not going to allow him to ruin our country, which we believe is his plan.
What does that mean at all costs, though? I mean, what does that mean? It obviously doesn't mean at all costs, right? I mean, you're engaging in overstatement, I assume.
It may be overstatement, but let's be very honest about what all costs means. That means we have to make sure that we have people at our local and state levels that are going to combat some of these Trump-like policies. We're going to make sure that even though he is encouraging the police to hurt individuals who have not even been adjudicated guilty, that we teach people in our communities that will not be accepted. That is at all costs. We will not allow him to take over our media by trying to scapegoat them and all the other minorities in the community. We are going to fight back. That is at all costs.
Hold on. So hold on. The media is a minority group now?
No. Let me be clear. He both scapegoats the media and he scapegoats minority groups separately, but both of those things were characteristics that Hitler used in order to have his reign during his regime. He tried to make it as though all the Jews were the reason why Germans could not succeed, just like Trump tries to say that all the minorities and the immigrants are the reason why Americans can't have jobs.
I mean, without getting into some like deep history conversation, I get it.
But I wonder, bad news and fake news.
Right. He says things you disagree with for sure, but did Hitler have a lot of media against him in Germany after he took power? Did he have people like you going on TV calling him names? Was there any opposition to Hitler allowed in public?
Well, what Hitler did is first he changed everybody's ideology. And then after he did that, he then only limited to certain media outlets that he himself would allow for people to learn from. And that's exactly what we see Trump trying to do. He's trying to make it so that people don't trust the media. And once they don't trust the media, now he's making his own Trump television so that he can put out all of his rhetoric, and the people who are following him are going to believe him. And those are the kind of people that Hitler used to take over.
Okay. Let's ask you a question. So I assume it's an article of faith with you and with many others in Black Lives Matter that Trump is a bigot. If you found out that Trump or any of his supporters had a meeting or a party and excluded people who were not white from that event, what would you say about that?
Then I would say for Trump, that's probably par for the course. I would not be surprised if Trump has already had several meetings in which he excludes people who are not of color. You can look at the pictures of his roundtable, of his interns, of everyone who he has
just to be clear,
with the exception of Omarosa and Ben Carson, he pretty much has already done that.
So, I mean, there's no evidence for what you said, but we know for a fact that Black Lives Matter across the country in a bunch of different cities, this is not speculation, it's a fact, they've said it, they've talked about it, has excluded people who weren't black. Why is that not racist? If you're an anti-racist organization, why are you excluding people on the basis of their skin color?
I don't know which Black Lives Matter events you've gone to, but I've gone to several Black Lives Matter protests, and there are people of all colors, races, and origins.
In Philadelphia, in New York, in Nashville.
Hold on,
slow down. No, hold on. No, the Black Lives Matter Twitter account said very clearly it referred to specific events as, quote, black only. There were a bunch of news stories about it. I'm not making this up. I've done interviews about it before. But it gets to a core question, which is how can you be against racism while committing it? It's a definition of racism to prevent people from coming to something based on how they look, based on their race. I think you would agree with that. You already did agree with that. So how can Black Lives Matter commit racism and be against it at the same time?
I don't believe Black Lives Matter commits racism. I do believe that they make a platform for African Americans to be able to have discussion about things that are important to them. But let's say the most important difference between Black Lives Matter: they're not elected president of the United States.
They're not, and I'm not saying they are. I'm not saying they have as much power as Trump or anything like that. I'm just saying, in New York City, there was a black-only Memorial Day party. Same thing in Philadelphia. Again, Detroit and Nashville. The leadership on your social media was asked, is it black only? Yes, it is. They said that, yes, it's black only. That seems like the textbook dictionary definition of racism. How can you be involved in a group that does that? That's my question to you. And please give me a real answer.
Again, you know, I can't speak to the Memorial Day event that you're discussing, but
it's not just one event; it's a bunch. I'm sure, but there are specific events from which people have been excluded based on their race. And isn't that what racism is? I'm against that. I thought you were too. Why would you be part of a group that did that?
You know, I won't say that they have because I wasn't there. What I will say is that the actual Black Lives Matter events that I have participated in, that I have direct knowledge and experience with, every single time there were people of every shade and color across the rainbow that were there supporting what Black Lives Matter is about. See, what you're trying to do is make Black Lives Matter.
I'm not trying to do anything other than report what is factually true, and I don't want you to skip out on answering a really important question, which is it wrong to exclude people on the basis of their race? Yes or no? Is that racism or is it not?
If you are excluding people based on their race with the intent of trying to subject the other races to some type of harm, danger, to subject them to systemic
racism, exclude them, then yes, it's a problem. Okay. Oh yes, it's absolutely about your intent. Right, you just don't want to take accountability for what is clearly racist.